Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Stately Office Hours. This is where we want to share with you what we've been working on at Stately and get your feedback and answer your questions, anything that you want to know about Stately and about XState. Now, first of all, let's start off introducing the team that's here. I know that we do this every week, but some of you might be new to us. You might not know who we are. So I will start off. I am Laura, and I do developer and designer relations for Stately. David?
Hey, I'm David. I'm the founder of Stately. I do a bit of everything, well, a little too much. I'm right now knee-deep in auto layout algorithms, so yeah.
And Matt behind the avatar.
Hello, yes, I'm Matt. I spoke to my agent and he says I should be more careful with my image, so this is why I'm not on camera today. I really need to get our contract sorted and, because there's value in my face, obviously. So, yeah, I'm a developer at Stately.
And Farzad.
Hello, my name is Farzad. I'm a humble engineer at the Stately. Matt, you need to wear your mask.
Oh, yeah. My avatar doesn't have a mask on. That's terrible.
Well, fortunately, we're all working from home, so no masks required here right now. So we thought we would start off with what you all love, which is a demo. Everyone loves a demo. We wanted to give you an update on what we've been working on with the editor. So David, do you want to give a little update on what we've been working on? And then Matt, you can show people.
Sure, yeah. We've been cranking through a lot of new features in the editor, which Matt is going to talk about. So long story short, we've been getting really good feedback from our beta testers and incorporating a lot of that feedback, plus a lot of planned features that we want to have. What you're seeing right now, or what you're about to see from Matt, is tip the iceberg. Come the end of January, we're going to have some really nice things to show you. So take it away, Matt.
All right, let's do it. So you can see my screen, and what I wanted to do first is I wanted to build something. You may be familiar with this layout already, and let's just crank through actually building a machine, and then I can show some new features along the way. The thing I really wanted to build was an authentication machine. This was my idea for the session today. And by authentication, we can kind of think about building both the front end and the back end. So let's imagine that this is like a sign-up flow, for instance, because this is something that XState does really, really well. Multi-step forms, that kind of thing. So the user, first of all, let's imagine they're on the homepage. Then they press, they press sign up or something similar. And they go to the signing up page. So sign up page. And from here, what we need to do is we need to, ask for some details or things like that. So ask for details from user, blah, blah. And probably in here, we can have like because these represent two different pages. So it makes sense to when you're on that page, you're now in a nested state. So this will be the first state. So this will just be the idle when the kind of form is showing. Down here, we can have another one, which is, let's say, sending details to the back end. And let's keep it like that for now. Now, let's get to a new feature, which is we have this idle state. And when we go to sending details to the back end, we want to kind of submit a form, let's say. And we can now, as you see, there's now an option to add a guard to this. So guarded transition wasn't something that we had in the editor before. It now is. So let's add the guard. And this guard is we need to check if the details they've provided are valid. So let's validate the form. So we can say if details provided are valid, let's say, then we go to sending details to the back end. And if else, so we can go else here and just drag this icon back. We probably need to alert the user that something is wrong with their details. So we can add an action, which is maybe like assign error message to context. You guys have probably written code like this before if you've used XState in production. I know that I have. So there we go. We've got this lovely guarded transition. And what we really like about this design is that it's very, very clear kind of the execution flow here. If you want to swap these around, you can just go, okay, do this instead. So click and drag downwards, which is kind of beautiful, really. And so now we're in that sending details to the backend state. We can add an invocation. So let's imagine we send details to backend. And if we fail, we probably want to go back to the idle state. And I'm going to call this, instead of idle, let's call this grabbing details or getting details from user. And this is the wrong type of event. You can see it automatically auto-completes to a done event, but actually what we want is an invocation error event. So it's errored, sending details to the backend, but when it's done, then let's add a final state here. You can see that we've sort of touched up this like type selector a little bit here. We in XState, you can have like atomic and compound states, but what we realized really is that atomic and compound states from a visual point of view are sort of the same. They're just atomic is like a state like this that doesn't have any children, and a compound state is a state like this, which does have children. And so from our point of view, we can just call those normal states really, because you can just add children or remove children, whatever you prefer. So let's call this a final state. And when we're done, we can just pull that over here. When we're done sending details to the back end, we're in the complete state. Now, this is interesting. We've got kind of the front end working. We know that when we're in the complete state, we can, I don't know, when we're done, go somewhere else. Or like, well, I mean, because there's a couple more steps here. We could go into like email verification, for instance, or sending a code or that kind of thing. But what I wanted to look at first is actually let's actually do that. I'm sort of going into a little bit more detail here now. And I'm going to add a new state, which is, let's call this verifying email. And in this verifying email state, I kind of want a pretty similar setup to this, which is I want my getting details from the user state. I want some kind of like submission. I want an error handling, and I want to complete here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag all this, and I'm going to copy. And then inside here, I'm going to paste it.
Oh.
So we now have the same setup as we had before, which is we have, let's see, getting details from the user over here. Let's see, complete needs to go down here. And we've got the error state probably over there. Done, send details to the back end. Yeah, there we go. So now we've got the same structure, but it's sort of got the same names. So you notice that copy and paste was so easy for me to do. It's just like grab all of the information and just paste it down there. It just feels really, really nice to do it. And so we don't need getting details from the user. What we want is, let's say, we have sent your code, let's say. And then the user submits the code. We probably don't want this guard here because we don't know yet if the details are valid. We can't validate that on the front end. So I'm actually just going to remove both of these guards here. So we'll just press delete on both of them. So there we go, submit code. Sending code to the back end is probably a better name. Change this invocation name as well, send code to backend. Notice, by the way, that send code to backend here updated, send code to backend there too. And when we're complete, we now know that the user has done everything, that their email is verified, and we can pretty much log them in. So we can also change this to a state.done event as well. This will mean that the signup page, when we're done with the signup page, we can go to the verifying email page. Now, this is all very cool as well, but let's imagine that you wanted to take a bit of this logic and put it in the back end as well. So we've got signup flow, and let's just call this signup flow on front end. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a new machine, which is going to add it to the same sort of grouping, the same system, and it's going to be called signup flow on the back end. And what we really want here is we don't really want this sort of first state event, second state garbage. What we want is we actually want a similar setup to this. Again, this is kind of like a promise, really. We want to validate the code they've sent or validate the, let's say, getting details from user state. Let's just copy this, go to this tab, and paste it in. So copy paste even works across machines, which is the really, really cool thing. So you can just even grab something like that's unrelated from a different machine and just paste it across. Like, you know, you can imagine these are like different actors in your system, and you're just able to copy logic across between them, and it works super nicely, super smoothly. Still a few bugs, as you can see, like all these arrows pointing in strange places, but the whole sort of flow is in general really, really nice and exactly where we want to be. So yeah, like the dream future for us is that XState can cross over from the front end to the back end and provide you with a visual experience encoding both of them. And if you guys got any questions about these features or anything I've missed, or
yeah, as with every week, you can ask us questions in the YouTube comments. If you're on Twitter, you can use #StatelyOfficeHours, or you can sign up to our Discord. The link is there, discord.gg/XState, and we have a dedicated office hours channel in there too. So if you've got any questions, feel free to ask. I was going to ask, what other features have we got coming up?
David, do you want to tackle this?
Sure. Yeah, we have some pretty exciting things coming up. So one of them that I'm tackling is auto layout. So right now, you might have a lot of machines that you created with Stately Viz, and you might want to edit them when the public beta becomes available and anyone can use this editor. But obviously, there's no layout information in just plain machines. So we want to give some good auto layouts defaults for you. And maybe in the future, just give you like sort of a prettier for layouts, but we're not working on that immediately. So yeah, that's one of the features coming up. Trying to think what else.
The next big thing we've got is simulation mode.
Yeah.
So being able to actually, similar to what you can do in the Viz, is actually walk through the machines that you've got here. So currently this is kind of like a static diagram, which is sort of useful for looking at things. But what you really want to do is you really want to go, okay, simulate. And you can go bam, 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 and check that everything works. This is going to be kind of different from what's on the Viz, because we want you to be able to test all the different paths that are there too. So let's imagine you're simulating and you're on the getting details from user state here. Then you should be able to click through like details provided are valid, send details to backend, blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of like being able to unit test your machine and being able to demo it to people, which is really, really, really important for verifying that it works, and verifying that you understand the logic of your own system.
Mm-hmm. And we feel like this feature is going to be really important because it's one of the biggest things that sells the visualizer, and also it's one of the biggest missing things in workflow tools today, where it's like, oh, you want to test your GitHub Actions workflow? Just try running it. And that's really scary. So you really want the ability to simulate things in a local controlled environment. Another one of the small things that we're going to be working on is editing labels inline, so that you could just like click on a label or an event's name and see it change within the diagram. And there's a whole lot of other interactions that we want to add soon too.
We're also working on the simulation mode that's going to come out in near future.
Yeah.
Probably the thing I'm most excited about is the idea of at the end of the day, these are just XState machines, right? And things that you do in the XState machine. So let's say add a target or modify a target or add a new state or rename a state, things like that. Those things, it should be possible to take the editor, point it at your machine in the code, like in VS Code, let's say, or the machines that you're running in production right now, visualize them and edit them with the Stately editor.
I want to highlight this comment. That'll be so cool to mock some action services by default just to select basic behaviors. So notice how when Matt was editing and creating his authentication or sign-up flow machine, he was just using plain English, plain sentences and whatever. He wasn't thinking too deeply about the implementation details, because in his mind, he has a broad overall idea of how this is going to work. And so with coding, it's like you sort of have to think about the implementation, maybe add to-do comments. It gets a little bit messy, but over here, you have a good higher level overview, which you could hand to a designer or a project manager, and they could say like, yeah, this makes sense. And then you just fill in the blanks. So it's like, oh, what does this event mean? What does this action do? Fill that in later or simulate it with something else.
And you get to be able to work at quite a low fidelity. You can say, let's imagine that the designer kind of forgets that there's like error validation, let's say, or forgets there's a loading state. They basically wouldn't have this sending details to the backend states. They'd really just say, go here and like submit form, and you sort of assume that it's always going to work. That's often how often how developers, or some developers, and how often designers and project managers will think. Whereas a developer would look at this and go, okay, that's a bit too simple. I'm actually just going to undo that. And by the way, that's another feature that we shipped a week or so ago, undo and redo. And now you get this sort of more deeper understanding of what's happening. The developer can actually work on this, and everyone else in the organization as well understands at a deeper level what's happening.
A lot of these... Sorry, you go, Fazad.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, let's not forget that diagramming tools have been around for a long while, right? But this is not diagram. Like whenever you're finished here, as David said, Matt was thinking just in plain English, and he was going on as he was building the workflow. He wasn't really thinking about the syntax or the implementation. Once it was done, this is an executable piece of code, so you don't have to think about implementing it then at all. So it just works, which is something very amazing. I mean, it's a given fact, but we don't really think about it enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all I need to do is really just implement this send details to backend function, the assign error message to context function, the if details provided are valid guard, and that's really, really easy to do actually.
Just imagine that we'll get to a case later on that you've built enough diagrams in the Visual Builder that you have all these services already, like you have references to them and just import them here. And imagine how productive you'll be with an entire architecture system here. Just very, very fast, bootstrapping ideas and projects. It's amazing.
Absolutely. Or even, you build the schema and you let GitHub Copilot fill in the implementation, for instance.
A lot of these ideas have been coming out of working with the beta testers, and we have had quite a few people saying, hey, when do I get my chance to be a beta tester? Now, if you haven't already signed up, eventually we will let people who have signed up with the email newsletter in. We're currently prioritizing people who have volunteered on our Discord. And really, honestly, so far, it's just a few at a time. We want to make sure that we're fixing things as we go along so that we don't have everyone coming in and reporting the same issues that we haven't got around to fixing yet, because there's a lot to work on and a lot to add. And so if you've volunteered previously and you've not been let in yet, that is why. We promise that we don't hold anything against you. And we're doing it first come, first serve. So we're trying to be fair with it. Now, we have a question of the week that we asked this week, and we got some really good feedback. And actually, really interestingly, ties in with some of the advantages we were just talking about in Matt's demo there. So this week, I have fancy slides. And we asked everyone, what are the biggest benefits you've had from using state machines? Because obviously, we're all fans of state machines here, but it's interesting to know what other people are experiencing as the benefits, whether it's in their projects or whether it is in their workflows. And we had Jan say, certainly for me, it must be that it allows me to very quickly get to the essence and core behavior of what I'm building. So we could see Matt doing that there. Playing with boxes and arrows allows me to not get caught up in implementation details while figuring out how I want stuff to work. Afterwards, implementing actions and services just feels like filling in the blanks. Likewise, with the hooking machine up with my component is equally trivial. Throw some state.has tags, state.context, and send in there, and you've got a stew going.
Sounds delicious.
It does, doesn't it? And Steve said, state machines make complex behaviors tractable. They help you think about the problem. State machines reveal complexities in ostensibly simple behaviors. They make you think about the problem. Yin and yang, good cop, bad cop. Thinking about your application behavior as a set of state machines focuses your mind on what's really going on inside that tangled mass of behaviors.
I always like Steve's choice of words.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think this is something that we can all identify with. It's so much of it is you're not faking your way to anything. You really have to understand what you're building when you're working with state machines.
Yeah, it forces you to be methodical in a way that other tools don't really. It prioritizes understanding your system before seeing your system on a screen. So the feedback loop is kind of longer, really, especially when you're working with state machines kind of as they are now, which is sort of playing around with create machine and playing around with JSON. But actually, if you can I think our grand plans are, if you can tie state machines more closely into your organization and the way that your organization plans code and plans features, then you really get a leg up over almost any other tool out there, because you're able to, for instance, imagine if your designers are working with state machines in mind, your project managers are working with state machines in mind, you're already halfway there if you start with the schema.
Yeah, and you think about all of the time you'll save, like not creating artifacts for like views that will never occur because you've not worked it out with the state machine yet.
Exactly. I think there's a lot of potential here for design tools to integrate with this, or for us to integrate with design tools.
Oresio said, programming is all about confidence. And for me, working with state machines gives me the same confidence on my code than writing tests, with the addition to have a visual representation of my system that I can discuss, show, and modify with all my teammates. Also having the confidence of refactoring code without the fear of breaking other parts of my app. Definitely XState is one of my top additions of 2021 to my dev tool belt. I think we'll be asking for a testimonial until we're using that.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of having the state machine as like sort of the brain of different parts of your app, rather than that having that brain spread out between different parts, because then it becomes really tough to, again, refactor your code.
Yeah, you're not having to relearn the whole thing every time you need to make a change. On Twitter, Martin said, I think that the biggest benefit comes from being able to use the same state machine across different frameworks. So this is like the copy and paste that Fazad mentioned earlier. With XState, even if you just use React on your projects, you can share your state machine to your insert framework name here, friends.
Yeah, there was someone on Twitter talking about he was looking back at some old code that he was working on, and it was in React. And he noticed that the React parts of it, like so much had changed basically in 2 years, and a lot of the implementation needed to change in order to modernize it. But the XState stuff was just the same, and he would write it exactly the same way today. And that's the benefit of working with something that hasn't changed in about 30 years. Like SCXML and state machines, they're always going to be the same. And so even if our API changes slightly, or the way you make machines changes slightly, they're always going to be interoperable.
I remember a tweet by Westbus this week that he was talking about the fact that React this week opened experimental support for web components to be able to port your UI from, he was talking about this example that in big companies, you usually have different projects that have different frameworks, for example, React and Vue. And with web components, you can actually try to come up with like universal UI components that you can port to different frameworks. I think we have a really good shot here with XState. Imagine that in those companies, in that perfect example that Wes imagined, you can just write your logic in XState and then port them easily to any UI component, any framework, even different languages. And I was a witness of that with being able to share the same state machine in the Fortnite game in Epic Games with the C++ in the engine and the web, like JavaScript in the web. And that's just amazing. It's really good. I just want to say that people are focusing on the UI. We need to shift a little bit on focusing on the logic as well.
Absolutely. The kind of component UI, and like there's so much sort of furious creativity happening in UI almost all the time. Component libraries are coming out. It's just a sort of like a maelstrom of activity in the open source world. And it's really not the most critical part of your app. The most critical part of your app is the, let's say you're talking about a fintech app, or a payment service or things like that. It's the logic of your app, and it's what leads to what. And we don't talk enough about having a framework for building business logic, and that's what XState can be, and I think that's certainly one of the, like, when you're talking about you want the parts of your app that are mission critical to be visualizable and for you to have confidence in them, that's where I really see this work.
I really like how you worded that, a framework for logic. I think
Yeah.
it's a good slogan for it. Yeah. And I'm really happy that the Chakra UI team is thinking about moving to XState for part of their UI logic. At least one of their core contributors, gave a talk in one of the conferences about designing a slider component using XState, which was very interesting. If you haven't checked it out, you can probably find it on YouTube.
Yeah, David,
I'll
I think
share
you've
a
been
link
talking
to it.
David, you've been talking to Segun, haven't you?
Yes, I have. And so they're definitely considering, either usage of XState or state machines in the next upcoming version of Chakra UI. But yeah, I really do like framework for logic. I was going to say maybe we need to make an update to the README, have that as a tagline. We're still playing with taglines.
Yes, whatever makes it easiest for people to understand. And I think that that's a really good one. And Pat actually shared a blog post that they wrote saying, last year I wrote up my journey of state chart discovery and the benefits we got while building Crucible. And if you want the URL for that full URL is tvac.com/2020/10/19 crucible-rip/#xstate. But it's actually a really interesting write-up. There's loads in there and loads about their process. So I'd really recommend it to anyone who wants to look a bit more into using XState and how it might work with their project. And finally, we had Joshua saying, changing and adding new features and behaviors easily. I really love Matt's article here, and he should definitely continue this series. And one of the reasons I included this was because I can nag Matt to continue the series on the blog where he wrote about UState versus useReducer versus XState. Part 1, modals. We haven't had another part since.
Jeez, man, guilt tripping me here. What's going on? Well, I mean, the second part of this is kind of was my talk at React Finland, actually, which is how XState just scales so much better the more refactors you do and the more features you add, and how it scales a lot better than how you might work with use effects, for instance, and use states too. So yeah, I would definitely recommend checking that out. Maybe I should turn that into a blog. Now that these guys have the blog, it's like the blog is like a stick to beat us with. It's, have you written your blog post yet? Oh, no.
Yeah, that is my job, is to nag everyone to write good blog posts because people want to read them. We want to have all of this great information out there. There's so much in your brains that we want to squeeze out. Now, we wanted to mention that next week, if you have any big questions that you wanted to ask about Stately and particularly of David, next week, David, you're doing an Ask Me Anything, aren't you, on IndieHackers? Yeah,
that's right. So they invited me to do an AMA, not a live one, just one on their forum thingy. So I recommend checking it out, asking any questions you have about the company, starting it, all of us. We will gladly, or I'll try to answer as many as I can, and maybe we'll answer some live on the air.
That's a good idea. And I think that is next Friday, before our office hours. It's at 8 a.m. Eastern time. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct. So
right?
we might get some questions coming in while we're doing our office hours.
Fabulous. We can double it up.
Yeah.
And also, it is worth us mentioning that next week's office hours will be our last office hours of the year, because we have a healthy work-life balance Stately, and so we will be having things a little bit lighter over the following couple of weeks. We will be back with a bang in January and with lots to share with you. Now, I saw some questions going by, so let me just roll back up and see. Charles asks, I use mixins and traits to share common states and behavior amongst different machines. I'm guessing those will not work with the editor. Are there plans to make this kind of reuse easier in XState itself?
Copy and pasting.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a cool question because it's actually not something I've thought about before. But if I just pull up my screen again, let's imagine that you have like a piece of logic that you want to reuse again and again. Like, let's say take something basic like a kind of throttle.
Would you zoom in slightly for us, Matt?
Yeah, of course. So let's imagine we've got this throttle and we've got a state inside it, which is like the idle state. You guys may have built this kind of a bunch of times before. throttling, and then like after however many seconds. So let's say after 500 milliseconds, we go back to idle. So do something. Well, in fact, this one needs to come from there, actually. So do something, throttling, and you go back to here. So we've all built this logic a bunch of times. And you could imagine, let's say, you wanted to copy this somewhere that wasn't inside a machine. You know, it's kind of like maybe a little machine on its own, let's say, or a little piece of state. And Charles is right. It's kind of like a mix-in or a trait, or it's like a behavior, something. And this is totally something we could support in the editor. You imagine like Figma has first-class support for components, for instance. So you can make a component out of a small piece of logic, let's say, or small piece of UI, and reuse that across different screens. So we could totally do something like that. David, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and our first foray into this is actually going to be something that some of our beta testers have asked for, or at least something that has been generally asked, which is visualization of like the actor system itself, which is the reason why we have this concept of systems, because you're not usually just working with one machine in a complex app. You're working with machines that might talk to other machines or other services. I mean, you could even consider if you make a workflow that has to send an email or check the weather, like that's communicating with another machine, you know, whether it's a machine or not. And so we want the ability for you to, when you're creating your machine, be able to invoke and reference that separate machine. And so now I'm thinking there's no reason why we can't extend that notion to, hey, I want to reference this action that exists in another machine or in my system somewhere, or maybe even access like a set of states like Matt was talking about.
I don't think we've got any more questions in the comments. I've just checked the hashtag. No one ever uses the hashtag the office hours channel. We did actually have one question which Fazzad very diligently answered in the office hours channel already, but Devin Fitzsimmons asked, is there space on these state or actions for meta information? The specific use case I have in mind is linking a specific state to a design doc in Figma or a Miro board, etc., which does make me think of ideas that Matt has had in the past.
Yes, indeed. I'm super keen on this. Oh, hello. Ignore that runtime error. That didn't happen. Yeah, I mean, like we've got this sort of description field right now, which is sort of on the right here. And like this could be almost anything. Like imagine being just imagine dragging a screenshot from your desktop, landing it on top of a state, and it just pings into there. Like imagine as well like I've tried to work on a Figma plugin, for instance, for XState in the past, where you would essentially create a machine here, and then you would link it to your Figma doc, and you could use the machine to drive a Figma prototype of your designs, which is super exciting. Unfortunately, Figma don't currently have the implementation quite ready on their side for that sort of prototyping in a plugin, which is a shame. But yeah, this is quite a dry document at the moment. As you look at it now, it will come to life a bit more when you simulate it. But imagine if you had just the ability to attach assets into different states and different events, all that stuff. Like the descriptions here are just like a small part of what we want to do, like blah, 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 blah. This should feel like a living document. And to that as well, we're thinking of adding nodes which are not specifically related to the state chart to this as well. So imagine that you just want to add a comment somewhere or want to attach an asset or anything like that. You should be able to do that and it not have to be like a formal mathematical thing. You know, it shouldn't have to be something that's actually in your state chart. So yeah, like we want these to be living documents that you can organize your organization around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, the Northern Star goal is we want your logic, your implementation, your tests, and your documentation to sort of live or at least be connected by the same executable diagram. And this is why in the future too, like this is not going to be just XState specific, like Matt was talking about. You know, you could have nodes for different things, maybe edit a GitHub Actions or other CI/CD pipeline workflow right in here. integrate it with other prototyping tools. Oh yeah, one little feature that we are going to eventually work on is the ability to add colors. So be like, I want this node to be green or purple or whatever. And same with edges. And doing that so that, you could provide semantic meaning to your nodes and make them even more easily communicable than just a bunch of, gray and white boxes and lines, which I like the monochrome, but, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty, but we all love syntax highlighting for a reason.
Yeah. So visual diagram syntax highlighting.
Yeah, we want this to feel like a first-class diagramming tool, and we're taking really a lot of inspiration and trying to improve on tools like Miro,
Miro,
like the artist, I think.
Okay, Miro, and that shows you went to art school, Laura. That's pretty impressive. And Whimsical and Excalibur or tools like that. We want to that's the flow that we want to disrupt, really. We want to take your diagramming time that you spend modeling anyway, and we want to make that executable. That's our goal, really.
Yep.
Fantastic. So we have a lot on our plate and a lot to look forward to. And as a sneak peek for next week, we might be asking you what you want to get out of XState. So have that in mind over the next week, because I think that would be a great way to round up the year, talking about all the things that we're looking forward to next year. And hopefully 2022 will be better for all of us than 2020 and 2021. They've been a hard couple of years, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Laura, if we're out of the topic, I was thinking about something random while Matt was coding his the workflow, the sign up thingy.
Cool.
Imagine how many developers have failed their interviews. These time box interviews that you go in and you give you like 15 minutes to write the throttle function. And Matt was designing a throttle function there, and I was just imagining a day that people will actually ask you to design something in the visual builder, like draw a diagram of your code there,
like as an interview.
Exactly. Like cool. It would be hard, to think about the asynchronous throttling effect in a time box manner, but like it would be pretty much more productive, and more predictable to do it in a visual builder, right? So it would be very nice. I mean, people have invited Dan Abramoff from React Core team to do the interview. We could probably ask other people to interview them over the visual builder
and see how they model things. Yeah.
Yes.
That's so cool. That's so much better than like reordering things in an array or something or some rubbish like that.
Yeah.
Totally.
And that's what you want to know when you're interviewing people, is you want to understand how they think and the kinds of things that have real world application, not how well do they use a search engine to find out what the exact syntax is for the code that they need.
And when you see how people model them visually here, you actually get a better understanding of how they think about problem solving rather than looking at their code.
Exactly, because there's an element of communication in all code, but specifically in visual code, right? You're having to name things properly. You're having to move between states and kind of see things over time. Like it's such a good idea, man. Yeah, so good.
It's already TDD, right?
Yeah. Well, SDD, state chart driven development. There you go. That's my next.
SDD is not the right name.
Not STD. No. Oh dear. That's no good.
Well, and now we know. And now we know what we'll be doing in the interview process for future Stately employees.
Damn right. Yeah.
Well, fabulous. If no one has anything else to add, I think we will wrap it up for the week. Thank you for joining us. And if you want to ask us any more questions or just come join our community, you can always find us at discord.gg/xstate. You can also find us at, I don't know if I have it up here, you can find us on Twitter at StatelyAI. And there we're starting to post some more stuff on Twitter. If there's anything that you particularly want to know or things that you would like to see us post, please let me know because we want to make the Twitter as useful as it can be to you as well. And on that note, we will see you all next week. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
See you all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.